you could come up today. Eva's going to share her testimony. And if you don't know Eva, you're missing out. Let's just say that.
Amen.
So, Eva, thank you so much for sharing. It's been so awesome to get to know you over the years and see you grow. And I want to pray blessing over you, and then we'll let you share. Dear God, thank you for Eva. We pray a blessing as she shares her testimony today. Thank you so much for her life, and we look forward to hearing what you have done in your life. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Let's welcome Eva.
Nick, help her. I don't know what to do.
Good morning, everyone. Thank
morning.
you for listening to me. As a child, I never had a religion. My family wasn't religious. I have heard of people praying to Buddha and going to Buddha temples and praying to the Buddha for protection and good luck, so I knew what praying meant. When I was 7, war broke out between China and Vietnam, and being Chinese, we had to leave Vietnam or risk being put in a concentration camp. So we sailed on a boat to Hong Kong refugee camp. Upon arriving in Hong Kong, we were each given a handout with a picture of a dove, a cross, and a man in it. I remember asking my mom, "Who is that man? What is it?" And she told me, "It was Jesus. It was God. You prayed to him." Being a child, I was more preoccupied with playing, so I soon forgot about it. After a few months in refugee camp, we were accepted to Canada. We arrived in Canada, and with the help of a government official, we were settled into an apartment. Then in our second week, some ladies from a church reached out to us. We were invited to attend church on Sunday. I remember following my mom into a room full of people, and they all had serious looks on their faces, but they were very polite. Then there was a man at the front chanting a bunch of things I didn't understand, all except for a few words. "Lord, you are wonderful. Lord, you are beautiful. You are great." Then silence, and everyone went on their knees and I asked Mom, "What happened?" And she said, "We were supposed to pray." So I closed my eyes and started praying about the things that were troubling me in my heart. And suddenly, I felt a hand touch my head. I opened my eyes, turned around, and no one was there. Then a bright sunlight shined in my eyes. Later, church ended and we went home. We never went back to church because Mom found a job that required her to work on Sundays. Then we met my stepfather. He was a non-religious man, but he had a painting of the Guan Yin. She was like a Buddha, and he gave it to us. Then Mom hung her up and started lighting incense to her and worshiping her. So she became our God from then on. After 3 years living in Canada, we were allowed to apply for citizenship. Upon swearing in as citizens, we were each given a Bible, but I didn't know what a Bible was. To me, it was just a book with writings and pictures. One day, while sitting on my bed, I got curious and started reading the book. It talked about a man going around healing sick people and even has illustrations. I thought he was a doctor. Then I went to sleep that evening, but in the morning, while still asleep, I heard a man's voice in my ears calling, "Eva." And suddenly I was moved to cry. And I got up. There was no one around. Like previous experiences, I soon forgot about it. Life went on. and we continue our belief in the Guan Yin for the next 30 or so years. Occasionally, we would go to the Buddhist temples and light incense and give offerings. Throughout this time, there were a few occasions when I would ask, who is above who, Jesus or the Guan Yin? But my main belief was still the Guan Yin. Then in 2002, my stepfather became ill and passed away. During this time, our family was having a lot of trouble with the people around us. They were mean and bullied us. At the same time, I had lost my job. But I strongly believed if you do good and have a good heart, the heavens will be kind to you. We decided to move away from the hostile environment, so we moved from Calgary to Edmonton and started fresh. We cut off all previous relationships and didn't build any new ones because we had lost faith in the goodness of people. At this time, we had a large sum of money, so I decided to invest it in the stock market to fund our living expenses. Things were starting to get better, and I was making a lot of money, so we had a comfortable life. We were self-sufficient and we were happy. Then in 2008, my mom started getting ill, and she said to me that she read in the newspaper that a certain stock was getting close to its peak and that I should watch my investments. Then she says she thinks I should sell everything and just concentrate on taking care of her. During this time, I was still making a lot of money, but my mom was unhappy. She often says she wants to die, and we often have arguments. Our family was in turmoil, and my husband was also unhappy. I was very saddened by the fact that I had worked so hard to bring happiness to our family, and nobody seems to be happy. And I thought, what's the use of having all this money? Nobody seems to appreciate my efforts. Then the stock market crashed. I lost 60% of our wealth in just one day. I sold everything and kept whatever we had left. In the following 5 years, I tried to make back what I lost, but I kept losing more money. And during this time, Mom's illness kept getting worse. By 2013, I had lost everything, including the money I had borrowed against the house, and also some cash that Mom had saved. I couldn't tell Mom for fear it would shock her and kill her. One day, I couldn't stand it anymore, so I fell on my knees and looked in the sky and said, God help me. Then I heard, patience. I didn't know what it meant, so I just went on with life, using my line of credit to fund daily living costs and pay the home equity line of credit. I was using debt to pay debt, so I was in very deep trouble. A few months later, somebody knocked on my door. It was a member of the Norwood Wesleyan church. He introduced himself and he asked me, do you believe you have sinned? Then remembering I had anger in me, I said yes. Then he prayed for me and gave me a Bible. Next few days, I had a vision of Jesus knocking on my door and coming in. A few weeks later, one day I was in the washroom. I heard a whisper, don't be afraid, I'm coming. I felt like it was Jesus again, but I didn't know what it meant. During this time, I was still trying to hold everything together, but later it got so overwhelming that I finally told my husband about our financial situation. Rather than getting angry with me, he said, he'll try to get a job. It was a little comforting, but I knew with all our debt load and living costs, it would take both me and him working together. But I couldn't work because Mom was ill and I had to stay home to take care of her. So we were still at risk of losing the house, everything, and we were close to bankruptcy. In the following 6 to 8 months, many strange and incomprehensible things happened, but in the end, it all worked perfectly together. I started having a desire to read the Bible. The first section I read was Proverbs. It spoke to me and convicted me of certain sinful feelings I was having. Then I started reading from the Old Testament. One day I heard a voice say to me, "Go to the house of God and speak to them. I will give you the words." Immediately I was drawn to the church on the corner of my street, which is this church, the Norwood Wesleyan church. One Sunday morning, I got up, took my Bible, went to the church while both Mom and my husband were still in bed. I haven't gone to the church in 37 years, and I was still worshiping the one me. My first time in church, I asked the pastor if I could get up in front and say a few things. After service was over, the pastor introduced me, and I got up and stood in front of a whole room of strangers, and told them I was a person who was in financial problem, and that God had called me to come to this church, and He had led me to Him in the Bible, and that the Bible was a book of life and a book of truth. And then I said a few other things which God put into my head, but I don't remember them now. But it made a lot of sense to the people listening to me. So they were kind of amazed at what I was saying, and I couldn't understand why I was saying all these things. And I went home and told my mom and my husband I had gone to church, and they were dumbfounded. From then on, I started going to church and studying the Bible and praying daily. I would often hear God's voice talking to me, and sometimes I would hear passages from the Bible which I have never read before. One day in church, they were praying for a lady who was getting evicted and couldn't find a place to live. She was pregnant and had 2 small children. While the pastor was praying, I heard a voice say to me, "Give to her." Then I asked in my head, "How much?" And I heard 10,000. Without thinking twice, I went home and wrote 4 post-dated checks for $2,500 each, along with the letter. As I was writing the letter, God gave me a vision of my boat, which I had traveled on when I was young, escaping Vietnam. It was almost sinking in the midst of the storm, and Jesus was standing over it. I got a sense that Jesus had saved us from that storm, and now it was time for us to give and help somebody else. So I wrote that experience and how I was moved by God to give. And I dropped the letter and the checks off at Kathy's mailbox. A few weeks later, while praying, I was moved again to give to Hope Mission and the Mustard Seed. I obeyed immediately and wrote 2 checks for $3,500 each, respectively. During all this time, I was still in debt and was borrowing from my line of credit to give. But God commanded me to give, so I obediently did it. I don't know where the courage came from. I just obeyed. Then my husband started looking for a job, and we prayed many times for him. One day he read in the newspaper that there was a job fair, so he decided to try it. I decided to let him go by himself. Mom asked me why I didn't go with him to support him, and I said, God would take care of him. With complete confidence, he got hired. All this time I was hearing God's voice daily and getting daily visions from him. One time he gave me a vision of Jesus standing at the front of our church wearing a white robe, and there was a spirit of a dove inside of him. He was standing right here. And I felt that Jesus was present in this church. I felt very much of his presence. Other times I would hear him say, don't worry, you will stand. I love you. Trust me. Don't lose faith. I am here. I will be there for you. I will surround you with my angels. I will surround you with good people. Call on me. I love you. Follow me. Love me with all your heart and I will protect you. You can't do it alone. You need my protection. Wait for me. You will understand. Every time I hear him say, I love you, I feel a deep love in my heart that words can't explain. It's just very deep. Meanwhile, Mom and I were still having problems. We seemed to argue a lot. One day, while sitting beside her, I saw her facial expression change to anger, and she pointed to me and said, "I hate you." Then I felt God was trying to get through to me. He wanted me to give her a message. So I said to Mom, God wants to say something to her. Then I started repeating what I was hearing in my head to her. Love your daughter. She loves you very much and will do anything for you. Upon hearing this, Mom's face suddenly turned very pleasant, and the anger quickly disappeared. Then I heard God say, tell her. He was telling me to tell her about our financial situation. I had been keeping it in my heart for 5 years and afraid to let Mom know about it. At God's command, I started to tell Mom, Mom, I have something to tell you. I have lost all the money you have entrusted me with, plus the amount I borrowed on a house. We are in a lot of trouble. Then to my surprise, she calmly said, what's done is done. I know you were just trying to provide for our family. I still have my old age security income. You can use it if you need. She didn't get angry with me. She didn't blame me. All I felt was love and support. And I thought, how did God know just the right time to break this news? How did he soften her heart? I was amazed. Then a few days later, God revealed to me that I was guilty of pride. And after that, he gave me a vision of someone who had hurt me very badly in the past. And he said to me, bless them. He was teaching me how to forgive. Not only forgive, but also bless those who have hurt you. He had restored my relationship with Mom, corrected my personality flaw, and healed my hurts by showing me how to forgive. But he was not finished restoring me yet. About a month later, I started hearing voices other than God's voice, and I started having visions of disaster. These voices and visions tried to prevent me from getting close to God. They confused me. They sometimes threatened me. I began hearing many conflicting voices. It got worse to the point that I started blurting things I'm hearing in my head, non-ceasingly. My husband got scared, so he called Kathy over to my house. She called the police and the ambulance, and they took me to the hospital. Then I felt Jesus following me to the hospital and stayed with me. I won't go into detail about my hospital stay because it would take too long, but to summarize it, they had diagnosed me with psychosis, and I had to stay 2 weeks and take medication. While I was there, they started applying for AISH for me. And then I heard Jesus say, this is for you. I got approved for AISH. But what's intriguing is that the amount of AISH benefit combined with my husband's wages, my mom's OH security benefit, was exactly the amount we needed to fund our living expenses and to cover our debt payments. It was like the finishing touch, the finishing piece of puzzle. And it also provided an income for me so I can stay home and take care of Mom. Through a twist of events, God has saved me from my financial woes, brought me to church, surrounded me with good people, my church family, restored my faith in the goodness of people, taught me the Bible, corrected my personality flaw, healed my hurts, gave me a more healthy attitude of giving, restored my relationship with Mom, brought peace, love, joy to my family. His grace and blessings was poured on my family. And this can all be summarized in the verse. Seek first God's kingdom, and all these things will be added unto you. And he still continues to this day to bless my family. Thank you very much for letting me share my story.